It is my great pleasure to welcome Rev Pam McMillan, who's going to be talking to us about lessons learned as a hospice chaplain.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Wonderful. It is so great to be back here with you. As Beth mentioned, my name is Rev Pam McMillan. My pronouns are she, her, and a description of my appearance. I'm on the shorter side. I'm 5'4", brown curly hair, and my entire outfit is thrifted, which is very fun. I'm a very big thrifted girl. This week I had an interesting conversation with, of all people, my chiropractor. He asked me how my job situation is going. He knows that things have been kind of hectic lately. And I excitedly told him, I actually have just accepted a new position. I am now working as a hospice chaplain with Health First Hospice. I've been there now for 3 weeks and I'm really loving it. Now, I've worked in hospice for a long time, for about 6 years now, and his response to what I said, when I said that I was working for Health First Hospice, was a reaction that is all too common when I say that I work in hospice. His reaction was, ew. Why would you want to do that? I have heard that reaction far more times than I can count. The initial response to most people upon hearing the fact that I work in hospice is disgust. Why on earth would you ever want to work in hospice? Why would you want to work with people who are dying, who are sick? Here's the truth. I have been working in hospice since 2017. It is not a career I ever expected for myself. It is something that I stumbled into. And yet I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is far more about life than it is about death. And it has been one of the most rewarding experiences and journeys I have ever been on. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about hospice, but overall what I want to share with you are the life lessons that I have learned as a hospice chaplain, things that I can pass along that I think we all can benefit from, all can learn from. Now to start, I do feel like I have to give a blanket statement about what hospice is, because so often there is a lot of misunderstanding about hospice. Hospice is not something that happens in the final days of your life. Hospice is a type of medical care that happens when you are going from a curative type of treatment to a symptom management type of treatment. It's a hospice, it's a benefit to all people that they're accessible to when you have a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or less. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody dies in 6 months. In fact, we have several patients who have been on services for 2+ years. And in fact, we've even have people who have actually left hospice because their condition improved. We call those patients graduates. You've graduated from hospice. The thing that you need to know more than anything else, do not be afraid of hospice. And in fact, statistics prove that people who go on to hospice care early enough and have their symptoms managed they live longer than those who are without. And I see several heads nodding I'm guessing that the heads nodding have actually been through it before, have lost someone that they've loved on hospice care. The people who have been in the trenches of hospice, they know how beautiful and sacred and meaningful that work can be. And my goodness, is it rewarding. So, there's also some information in the back that I did provide. I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. But that's kind of a general overview of what hospice is. But these are the stories that I want to share, the life lessons that I have learned. The first is that compassion and empathy, it starts with listening. And when I say listening, I don't mean just hearing with your ears, as we are often wont to do, but I mean deep listening, fully leaning in without judgment, and quieting our own voices to open us up to the sacred moment that is in front of us. Truly being present, turning off that inner monologue that feels the need to say something and to jump in, but to quiet that voice and to truly receive what that person is giving to you. Every single moment we have an interaction with someone, when we have an opportunity to listen to them, it is a sacred gift, an opportunity to hear their heart, to learn from them, and to grow. And truly, compassion and empathy starts with learning how to quiet that voice inside of us and truly hearing, receiving what the person in front of us has to say. And maybe you all know this, but it took me a while to learn, but that deep listening doesn't always require hearing with your ears. Sometimes it is truly just receiving what is in front of you. One time I was asked to visit a woman in a memory care unit who was pretty far along in the stages of dementia, and she could no longer feed herself. So the nurse had asked me if I would be willing to feed this patient. And she had in front of her about 3 different types of mushy brown food that did not look appetizing in the slightest. And I sat with this woman, and I slowly fed her spoon after spoon. The first 10, 15 minutes of it, I wanted to run for the hills. I was bored. I was looking at the clock. I did not want to be there. And then I stopped. I said, wait a minute. No, I need to slow down. I need to be present. Because this person in front of me is beloved. They are sacred. And this opportunity that we have together will never happen again. So I quieted that inner voice. I started to feed her. And I remained present. And what happened in that moment, something inside me changed. And I recognized that what we were doing was worship together. We were bonded in this sacred space. Through this simple act of me feeding her and her receiving was divine love fully enfleshed in our presence together. I think back at that experience, and it was not necessarily a remarkable event or visit in and of itself, but because of my willingness to quiet, to listen, to be present, opened me up to a sacred moment that could never be manufactured. If we are going to be a people who are truly compassionate and empathetic, we need to be willing to slow down and to listen. The second, and as Unitarians you already know this, but it's always a good reminder, all people are sacred, and so is their spiritual journey. Now, this may not come as a surprise to you, but a lot of assumptions are that chaplains are exclusively Christians, or that we exclusively only visit Christian patients. And that is the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, what our jobs are to walk alongside people on their spiritual journey and help them find meaning and connection and peace, whatever that may look like. Being a chaplain has taught me the importance of slowing down, of not pushing my beliefs on a single person. Because at the end of the day, if I'm caring for someone, it does not matter what I believe, it matters what they believe and what will bring them comfort. And every opportunity that I have to be at the bedside is an opportunity for me to learn from them. Some of my favorite patients have been atheists who wanted to recite poetry to me. Some of them have been Jewish patients who have welcomed me with loving arms at the bedside and taught me prayers with the family. One of my all-time favorite patients was a man who had practiced Tibetan Buddhism for 50 years. And it was interesting because though he had practiced Tibetan Buddhism, which focuses so much on suffering and the practice of dying well, as he was confronting his own mortality, he started to become fearful. And so what I did as a chaplain was I decided to just open up and learn from him. And I started asking questions. I wanted to learn more about his belief system and what has brought him meaning. And in doing this and having him teach me what's important, it allowed him to surface and find what it meant to him. I would sit at his bedside and we would listen to readings of the Tibetan Book of the Dead together. And he let me ask him questions. And I could see with my own eyes something that I think so many people struggle to see, is that all people have sacred worth and value. And their journeys are sacred, whatever it looks like, whatever path the journey takes you, their journey is sacred. Along with that, everyone has a story. Be a student. Ask genuine questions, and most importantly, stay curious. There's a quote often attributed to Walt Whitman, be curious, not judgmental, which has since become very popularized by the television show Ted Lasso. Any fans in here? No? Yeah, okay, there's at least one. It's a great show, highly recommend. Be curious, not judgmental. Curiosity has ended up becoming one of my core values because I'm a chaplain. Because you can never make assumptions about what is on a person's mind. You can't assume anything. But if you remain curious, if you remain inquisitive, what you are able to do is to not only learn from that person, but to show respect to them. Because you are now the student and they are the teacher. And they can show you what is important to them, what is meaningful to them. And by being curious, it manages to pull away all of the crap, all of the assumptions that we can put on people. And instead, we start to see the person in front of us. Just 2 weeks ago, which blows my mind that this happened, I had such an interesting encounter with a patient. I was visiting this woman who was born and raised Southern Baptist, and we had a wonderful visit. So much heart, so much love, and I got to hear a little bit more about her story. Now, at the end of it, I offered to say a prayer for her, which is something that I do with a lot of the patients. But I always ask, what would you like me to pray for? The reason for that is, one, again, I can't assume. I can never assume what a person wants to pray for. And two, that may be an opportunity for a person to open up about something on their mind that they hadn't yet been able to talk about. So I prepared myself and I asked this person in front of me, what would you like me to pray for? And she said to me, you know, abortions have been on my mind recently. Okay. I will admit that I have visited my fair share of conservatives. And I've learned how to, again, try and shelve any of my own belief systems and to lean in and be curious, to try and remove any assumptions I may make about them. And so I turn to her and I say, can you tell me more about that? What's on your mind? And it blew me away. She was clearly someone who was pro-life, but this is what she said. You know, when I was younger, I used to work at a psychiatric unit. And a lot of the nurses who worked there had previously had abortions. And some of them had them for good reasons. But I saw the emotional toll that it took on their souls, on their spirits, how heavy it was for them. So I would like to pray for anybody who has experienced an abortion, that they may find ways to have peace with their hearts and with what happened to them. I mean, right? This is a hospice patient I visited, and I would have never guessed in a million years that is what she would want me to pray for. Seriously, if I was a gambling woman, I would have lost. Hardcore. And instead, I was able to learn and to hear from this person. And if I hadn't been curious, if I hadn't leaned in, I would have missed out on such a beautiful opportunity to see a person with so much love in their hearts and someone else who is able to love free of judgment. Another lesson I have learned is to trust that you will be given the right words, or even better, the silence that is necessary. I feel like I encounter a lot of people who don't know what to say when a loved one dies, when someone that they know loses someone that they love. They struggle. They feel like there's got to be a right thing to say, a right thing to make somebody feel better who is going through something difficult. The truth is, you already have the right words in you. You don't need to worry. You don't need to panic and think that there is some magical formula, some magical word phrase that you can say to make someone feel better. Truthfully, the only ever magical words I've ever heard, the only truly authentic words that I can offer you to say to someone who is in pain is, "That sucks." That's it. That's it. That's the closest thing. But you as a person have lived a unique life, have encountered countless people, have seen things that no one else has seen before. When you are with somebody in pain, trust that you have exactly what you need to offer that person in front of you comfort and peace, to offer them words of love and compassion. The words will be given to you. And sometimes it's not words. More often than not, it's silence. Another story. I'm going to tell a lot of stories. Just buckle in. This is what this is about today. This is actually a story not of when I was a hospice chaplain, but when I worked at Tampa General, which I don't know if any of you are familiar with. Tampa General is a Trauma 1 hospital with 1,000 beds. And Trauma 1 means that the worst of the worst comes to that hospital. Nobody gets turned away. So I was a baby chaplain. I was 2 weeks in, and I had to respond to what is called a code blue. For those of you not familiar, a code blue is when a person's heart stops, and they must do compressions on somebody's heart. So I'm at this bedside of this woman, this gentleman who is in his 50s, and the wife was at the bedside. They did compressions for about 30 minutes before the wife said, "Please stop. Just stop." And so the doctors stopped. They called time of death. And then all of the medical staff left the room. And it was just me and her at the bedside of her husband. Again, I'm 2 weeks on the job. And I'm responding to this. And I have no idea what to say to this woman. She falls down on the ground, weeping in tears. So I got down on the ground next to her. I put my hand on her shoulder, and I just sat there and let her cry. When she finally spoke, she said to me, "God didn't answer my prayers. Why does God not like me?" I was panicked. I was absolutely dumbstruck and panicked. What on earth am I going to say to this woman? What on earth am I going to say? And instead, I just listened to that still small, quiet voice inside me that said, "You don't have to say anything. Just be there for her." So again, I left my hand on her shoulder and I let her cry out, so that she knew that those cries out to God were not something to be ashamed of, but that she had someone with her who felt her pain, who was with her to walk through that journey with her. Shortly after, family members arrived, and they were clearly evangelical Christians, because when she started crying out, she said the same exact thing. "God didn't answer my prayers. God does not like me." And they refused to let her say those things. No. God loves you. God loves you. They refused to let her lament. They were so uncomfortable with it that they tried to shut it down for their own benefit. Meanwhile, this woman is having a crisis of faith, and what she needed more than anything was someone to just sit with her and to let her cry out, reminding her that she is not alone. Finally, the last lesson that I'll share with you this morning. This quote has stuck with me for a while. It's from Gwen London. "Dying is a spiritual event with medical implications." When I talk to people about hospice, who have not been close to the bedside, who've never experienced it, they assume that people are panicked or worried about what's going to happen to them after they die. They assume that people, especially evangelicals, are going to worry about going to heaven or hell. Let me tell you first off, nobody is worried about that at the end of life. They're worried about their family. They're worried about their children, what's going to happen to them. They need assurance that they will be okay. So oftentimes as a chaplain, what I'm doing is helping that person find assurance that their loved ones will be okay, and helping them find the peace that they need. Peace in the spirit, peace in the soul. These things are so deeply interlinked that we cannot refuse. Again, Unitarians, you get this. Our minds, our bodies, and our souls are all deeply connected. That's why chaplains are so necessary. Chaplains are helpful because we can walk alongside and be those companions along the spiritual journey. Dying is about releasing that spirit and finding the sacred home that we once came from. And it's part of our jobs to help people through that process so that their spirits can find the peace that they need. One of my all-time favorite stories of something that has ever happened. This actually happened a while back ago when I was serving as a pastor, but it's still appropriate, and it still happened in a hospice house, so I think it counts. I was asked to go visit a patient who was in a hospice house, which is basically hospice. We go to people wherever they lay their heads at night, but then there's a select small few that actually that have to go to what's called a hospice house. It's kind of like an ICU, but really relaxing and lovely, beautiful environment, so people can receive treatment for pain, respite care, or sometimes end of life. So this patient gets sent to the hospice house. I call the family. They say, you know what, it's going to be a few days. You don't have to come right away. Don't worry about it. Something in my gut was telling me you need to go right now. And I'm a firm believer that when your gut tells you something, you need to listen. There's something sacred happening there. So I did. I was at the bedside. This whole family was around. And I decided to invite them. Something, again, was in me, was stirring. You need to pray right now. Right now. So I gathered the family around the bedside. We all held hands. And I said a prayer over the patient. This was a Christian family, so I will say that I invited them to say the Lord's Prayer afterwards. I don't do that all the time, but in this case, it was appropriate. Upon concluding this prayer together, we looked at the patient and we realized that they had taken their final breath while all of us were saying the prayer together. The moment that he passed, he was surrounded by his family, and he was sent off with prayer in the unified voices of all of the people that he loved. I know that not every death happens that beautifully, but that reminds me of what a beautiful and sacred event it can be. It's not always sad. It can sometimes be so joyous to welcome, to send off a loved one, and to know that they are being welcomed home to a place where we all come from. And it's our duty as people to hold space for those who are on that journey, and for those of us, it is our duty to hold those who are in grief, which is itself a sacred event. This is a hard subject, I know that. And I apologize if it has brought up something that maybe feels uncomfortable, but I thank you for being present in this moment. I thank you for not turning away, because you have courage that so many people don't. In hearing this message and hearing these stories, you have the courage to lean in, to stay curious, and to experience the divine in the most unexpected of places. Thank you so much.